shade of a newly emerging sort of instability. We are aware of the economic outcomes of the post-pandemic era and consequences under the cloud of natural disasters. Meanwhile, we now revisit sort of conflicts with its postmodern modus operandi. In this sense, the problem statement of this conference is, where does the globe traveling after the impacts of environmental degradation, affiliated or not, natural disasters, and conflicts? The conference will also cover what must be done to prevent further grievances and how, if the negative impacts of these inputs are concerned. The conference will have 3 panel sessions, either physically attended in each venue of the participating organizations or through virtual meetings. Each panel will have a moderator, and the panelists will present their proceedings for distinguished scholars' critiques, comments, or contributions. The first panel will focus on the impacts of the Ukraine war in terms of economy, security, and global governance. The second panel will delve into the collective response and security environment in future. And it will deepen the discussions, I believe. The third panel will cover a bouquet of proceedings to scrutinize compartmentalized characteristics of the approaching term. We have planned to proceed for 1.5 hours, sometimes 2 hours in each panel. We kindly request the panelists to limit themselves to 15 minutes. There will be a discussion session on every panel, and we expect the participants to contribute their opinions. And a reminder not to be exposed to technical limitations. Please, the ones listening or attending as guests, please mute yourself and turn off your video, except for the panelists, or not, excluding this session. By that way, there will be a smooth stream of video coverage. And once you contribute to designated sessions, please activate yourself. On the other hand, please be aware that this conference is being broadcasted through YouTube. Now, I would like to invite Professor Türkay Dereli, Rector of the Hasan Kalyoncu University, for his keynote speech and welcoming remarks. Sir, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Honorable Ambassador, dear professors, colleagues, and distinguished guests. First of all, please accept my welcoming remarks for the occasion of this timely event. I would like to thank the academic staff, our academic staff, for leading this event with the partnership of, first of all, SITA Foundation from Ankara, Türkiye, New Strategy Center, Bucharest, from Romania, Deutsches Orient Institute from Berlin, Germany, Georgia Strategic Analysis Center, Tbilisi, Georgia, Center for Diplomacy, Andreas University, Budapest, from Budapest, Hungary, Center for Geostrategic Research and Terrorism from Belgrade, Serbia. I welcome our American, Swedish, Dutch, and Italian colleagues monitoring the conference as well. Committed to building awareness and consciousness on global and regional hard and soft politics, our main concern is our shared resilience, acknowledging the indispensable fate of all species of our planet. We are breathing the same air and destined to sing or progress together. Keeping this reality in mind, we, as the epistemic community, assume that the role of organizing international and transnational events to reach the reasoning of the global public in the way of to promote wellness. The third international conference on global security, which complements the previous two conferences, has focused on a very significant topic this year, Ukraine conflict and its aftermath toward a new systemic turbulence. This question is currently shaping the projections of the epistemic community and the decision makers to counter the perceived threats and manage the already salient risks. In this sense, the international community was dealing with the ambiguity of the 90s and terror concerns of the 2000s and the public protests of the 2010s, but the 2020s are more complex and mixed. Nowadays are more complex and mixed. So there exist two avenues of security perception in this decade. Species on Earth, other than humanity, are exposed to the degradation of the environment with emerging threat sources. Despite this pattern, state-centric conventional and unconventional turbulence multiplied the effects of soft threats. Nature's response to the uncontrolled growth of humanity is devastating, while the global awareness of this fact did not stop the security escalations and threatening the global stability as well. The Russia and Ukraine war clearly increased our pessimism as well. It recalled the classical, the realist interpretation of international politics and reminded us the worst case scenarios for the future, unfortunately. So we are in a situation discussing the approaching such economic trauma in the coming years, while projections on probable even nuclear warfare. On the other hand, states started sparing their budgets for non-education, for military purposes, for military expenditure, rather than the potential natural disasters due to climate change. Are we sailing? So the question is at this point, are we sailing to the worst case scenario? In this context, I believe that we as academics must do more to remind the dangers of this type of negative resonations. For this reason, this conference, I believe that is a distinguished activity to integrate both theory and the practice, both to integrate, amalgamate the synergies of theory and practice to be more prepared for the risks of the world. I wish we contribute to the desire to desire change and progress in a way to promote our common future. Once again, I would like to thank the board members of the conference, since they have started to organize such a successful and continuous series of this conference. Thank you very much.
Sir, thank you. Thank you for your kind thoughts. And,
you are welcome.
I would like to now invite Ambassador of Ukraine to Ankara, His Excellency Vasyl Bodnar, to deliver his keynote speech. So we can have a general idea exactly what's going on right now, because it will be the base of our discussion. So, Your Excellency, Mr. Ambassador, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you very much, dear Rector, dear academics, dear professors. Thank you very much for inviting me to participate in this event. It's a very important one. And thank you for paying so much attention to the situation in Ukraine and Russian-Ukrainian war. So actually, let's start from the definition. So the title of today's conference maybe need to be a little bit modernized, because when we are saying about Ukraine conflict, it reminds me some kind of Syrian conflict or conflict in Yugoslavia or something like that. So it is not so. It's ordinary war between two countries, and it should be called correctly. Then if we are saying about the consequences, we should say what was the reason of this war. So, and when we start to look for these reasons, you couldn't find these reasons except the chauvinistic and very aggressive attitude of Russia towards the world. It's not about only Ukraine, but it's all about Georgia, Syria, about Balkans, about Europe, about United States. So all the aggressive attempts of Russia was reflected now in the military activities against Ukraine. But de facto, they would like to fight, or they're announcing that they are fighting not only with Ukraine, but with almost half of the world, or with NATO, as they said, actually manipulating the terms and reality. Then Ukraine was not the country who want to fight the war. So we were a peacefully developing country. We have been investing a lot in development, in road infrastructure, and different other things. And I wouldn't say we were wrong, because we would like to have a peace with all neighbors. And our request to join European Union and NATO was just let's say the ground for peaceful development, because otherwise we could invest more in defense and will be much more stronger and not so easy target as the Russians believe we are. So that is the key and very important dimension of the story. But now we understand that the reality is different, and we need to reestablish all our budgets, etc., and actually defending ourselves with what we have, and asking our partners, which we are grateful for all the possible assistance. So the third dimension of the story is how it's going on. We see the front line. The front line is being kept by Ukrainian forces, and even Russians are withdrawing from some dimensions, but it is not a promising story, because still it is ordinary warfare. In some places, it's like World War I, when the artillery is creating a terrible mass of earth and dead bodies. So it's really a very, very terrible war in 21st century. Maybe the first ordinary war which exists from the very beginning of the century. And it also reflects in a number of consequences. So the biggest consequences is also the suffering of Ukrainian people and suffering of Ukrainian state. But also all the neighboring countries are also feel the consequences of the war, starting from the economic ties, ending to the food crisis, environmental challenges, and many other consequences, migration, and any other things which we should cope with. So we are grateful for all the solidarity of the world and all the countries, particularly to the country which I have the honor to be present in Ukraine, to Türkiye, because Türkiye is the only country who did their best in promoting mediation, in promoting diplomacy, in bringing two sides of the conflict to the negotiation table and actually achieving results. That's the most important thing. But majority of the world is still out of the story. If the world is not aware of all the details, what's going on here, and what are the consequences or possible consequences, or worst scenario, as the Rector said, we could not estimate the real danger of this war for the whole world, for the global security. Because if we are now start to speak about these dangerous scenarios about using of nuclear warfare or creating some other very dramatic scenarios in which we are living on, because even today, if you look at the situation in Ukraine, the ordinary people are suffering not only from the military activities, but from the shortages of heat, water, electricity. So it's the different type of war. It's already became the terroristic activities of the one state against another. If you mentioned, we are not responding in the same way. So we are not attacking civilian infrastructure, and we still not responding in the full scale, and we're still a victim, and the aggressor is still aggressive, and it should be called correct. So what about the next steps? We need a peace, but we need not a peace, but the peace. The peace, which means that this conflict should stop the spreading of this aggressive policy of Russia, and that it should not lead to the Third World War. And that's the responsibility of the whole world. Because if you look today who is supporting us and who is on the sides of Russians, it's already not just bilateral conflict. The other story is about what to do next and how to achieve the peace. We have a good talks in March in Istanbul, and there were promising arrangements which actually bring sides together. And the key idea was to withdraw forces, Russian forces, from Ukrainian soil, and then establish all the political stories. But Russians think in another way. They just regroup forces and continue attacks. So our key task is now to pull back Russian forces from Ukraine, to take those who are responsible for the war to responsibility, to bring them to responsibility, and it will prevent repetition of this evil in future. And the story about compensation is also very actual, because otherwise we couldn't restore neither our country nor economic ties in the region. And also very important thing is what to do with Russia. Because if we remain the same situation in Russia as it is, the aggressiveness of the society, which is very galvanized by the propaganda and by the 20 years of this aggressive rhetoric, it could repeat their attacks to smaller countries, other countries, NATO, whatever. And we didn't know what is in mind of not only Putin, but all the guys who could do the worst scenarios as we are thinking about that. So I believe that global security could be decided, could be, so the response to the challenges, global challenges, should be taken by the global community. It's not only neighboring countries' responsibility, it's not only NATO or big players, but also the whole world should be included in the process of settlement and engagement in the establishing of the post-war order. It's also important because it's challenging, it's already changing the balance of power in the world. Russia is decreasing, and we should take caution actions in order to organize some kind of big international conference, first of all. And we proposed it during the Security Council meeting last September, to organize some kind of conference for the post-war settlement and the new global security, which will be balanced not on the existing non-working system, because UN is not responding correctly to for what it was created, but to create a new system of global security, maybe based on reformed UN, or maybe we need to construct something else. That may be food for thought. I will not take much of your time. Thank you very much for inviting me here. So I have a lot of ideas, but I will not share it immediately, letting it be for the future discussions and elaboration. Thank you very much.
Sir, thank you. Thank you so much for your contribution and your keynote speech. I know that there's a lot going on, but just we see what we are imposed by media, because we are not over there. And you know better than us, you have a regular reporting system, and it's good to know exactly your thoughts, but then, clear abstraction of the events. Thank you so much. So if you allow me, I will start the first panel. Ambassador Andreas Reinicke does have an exceptional situation right now. So I will start the panel without him, sorry for this. And he said he's really sorry about his situation. So I would like to start the first panel based on the general concept or general findings of why we have arranged such a panel in this conference. Well, Ukraine war, it's a fact over there. On the other hand, it's not the only dynamic in international politics. That means we have a lot of differing and weighing inputs to the security, continuation of stability and prosperity of the globe. On the other hand, third parties other than Ukraine, Russia, or the actors directly involved in this occasion, well, they have different and differing, sometimes contradicting perceptions. But we must be aware of one thing. We have just concluded a process and not ended. It was the COVID pandemic and still recovering from the consequences of this pandemic. On the other hand, if you just go through the natural disasters of last year, there was an extreme during the summer. We had floods and wildfires in the meantime, and we are expecting earthquakes mainly around Marmara region, maybe with a chain as time passes in other regions. So natural disasters. So we have to add another dimension, COVID pandemic, a war of the integrated old and new nature, and in the meantime, natural disasters as a potential threat. So we have some expected traumas, and we have to be aware of these potentials because we must increase the preparedness of the humanity, societies, states, whatever unit you refer, and also we must have reserves that could provide support to unexpected situations. That means it's not that much easy to run the system without being prepared. And it needs projection actually. So we have many known unknowns, that's for clear. Well, if you check the literature, unknown unknowns are usually not on the scene. On the other hand, even though it's nonsensical, well, we have still some unknowns, still not aware of it. I mean, we are just aware of it because we don't know them. In this case, we academics usually visualize the impacts of such traumas. The first one that we commit is to categorize them in terms of economy, societal, etc. And in this panel, we prioritized economy, security, and global governance because we feel that these three issues are really imminent to address. For instance, if you now we will have an economic winter in the coming period. Raw materials, it's a great problem because there was a shortage of production during the pandemic COVID. On the other hand, there's a reality. Once the balance in economy is just challenged by the inputs like Ukraine-Russia war or Russian aggression on Ukraine, well, now there's a problem in terms of accessing not only the energy resources, but the other raw materials. Well, there is a dilemma, I believe. It's the production and consumption dilemma. The growth of the global population, in the meantime, the decrease in consumption, that means it's a dilemma. People demand more, consumption is huge, but production is low because of the inputs that we have circulated right now. And consumption, the attitude of public, well, the ones as Mr. Ambassador emphasized at the other side of the globe, I mean, not that much interested in what's going on right now. Well, they are the multiplier. So they exaggerate and they increase the effects of the inputs on the global system. If you take security, for instance, we have soft and hard security issues delineated a lot of times in the previous experience. And we remember Barry Buzan's category of security and desecuritization, but still now it's short of explaining everything. Food is something over there, and we have the concerns on humanity security, but other than this, as our rector emphasized, now we have planet's security as a point of concern. Planets, I mean, you can't exclude any creature on the globe to be distinct, to be extinct, actually. And global governance, as His Excellency Ambassador says, well, it's short because if we need economic security, it needs a response that requires a collectivity. We have UN system. We have other specialized international organizations at global level or regional level, but not functional. That means we are dependent on state-led solutions. So short of responding them. So as academic community, epistemic community, I think we should start something. We should start engaging to media. We should start explaining to public. And in the meantime, start pressuring to set a functioning system in the globe. In this sense, I would like to start the panel with the thoughts of first Professor Ahmet Keser, because Ahmet Keser has scrutinized the narratives of the leaders, and it does have an impact on the proceeding of global politics, interactions, etc. So may I kindly request Professor Keser to present his ideas about the narratives and the leaders. The floor is yours, Professor.
Thank you very much. First of all, I want to say hello to all participants, Mr. Ambassador, dear professors, and dear members, and starting from our rector to all academics, I want to say hello. And also thank you, dear Dr. Aslan, for inviting all of us for this nice event with the organization of our department in cooperation with our respective organizations from all over Europe almost. So let me share. May I share my screen? So if you can make me co-host, please. I will present the analysis on the discourses of the two leaders, the President Zelensky from Ukraine and President Putin from Russia. What they said just before, starting from the 15 days before the war till the day of the war. So we have selected last 3 speeches of the leaders and analyzed them through a Max Kuda program. So the aim of this analysis was to conduct a different investigation through the speeches of the leaders on the eve of the Russian-Ukrainian war. So the analysis is based on the speech of President Putin and President Zelensky, which they were given in the last 15 days, as I said. We have selected 3 speeches from each leader. So it is based on qualitative and quantitative approach, and mainly a content analysis on the discourses was completed. So the selected speeches of the leaders were from Putin's side on February 15th, his speech, which he put the blame on USA and NATO for the Ukraine crisis first. The second speech of Putin was his speech, which he just gave in the Kremlin on the 21st of February. And the last one is again in Kremlin, addressed by Putin. From the President Zelensky part, the first speech selected was his speech on the unity of Ukrainian society on February the 14th. The second is on February the 19th, his speech, which was delivered in Munich Security Conference by President Zelensky. And the third one is on 24th of February, just on the day of the war started, his address to the nation. So 3 speeches were analyzed within this frame. So the war discourses of presidents were analyzed according to the strategic culture spectrum within this perspective through Max Kuda program. Accordingly, in strategic culture spectrum, we differentiated into 4 subcategories, which the first one is constructive, deliberative strategic culture. The second is passive defensive, which means that if a country attacks me, I defend myself. The third is active defensive, which means that if I feel that a country will attack me, I attack before him. So a proactive defense, we can say as active defense or aggressive defense. And the last is offensive. I attack first, simply. So these attributes were derived using the relevant codes, which I will present later. And the research questions to be answered afterwards was, what are the most frequent quotes in the speeches of the presidents used just before the war? Is there an ongoing consistency for the attributes of strategic culture for each leader? And after the content analysis, which qualities were dominantly emphasized by the presidents? So concerning the structural culture, we used the Johnston's 3 categories by dividing the defensive category into 2 as passive defensive and active defensive, as conducted by Emine Akçada. So this shows the structure of the international system through the window of strategic culture. So it is a kind of constructive realist approach, as most of you are aware. So the caveats and limitations of the research, of course, again, by mentioning Johnston, he comes up with 6 caveats and tells that from the 2nd one to the 4th one, the approach allow for testing. So we use from the 2nd to the 4th. Strategic culture provides a limited range of choices and is an intervening variable as a consistent set of ordered preferences that exist across time. And it explains the influence on the policy process, but it is not the single determinant, of course, which we have to keep in mind. So the codes which we used during the analysis for the constructive sub-attribute of strategic culture, the codes are agreement, ceasefire, comrade, negotiation, discussion, peace, settlement, and tolerance. For passive defensive, alliance, allies, confidence, defense, freedom, independence, justice, privilege, legal. For active defense, border, delimitation line, crisis, danger, security, strong, struggle, threat. For offensive, enemy, fight, invasion, occupy, military, soldier, strength, war, combat, weapon, and their synonyms after the expert opinions were received. So starting from Putin's first speech, which he delivered on the 15th of February, we see that first he uses active defensive, which is very close to offensive side, but not offensive yet, just 15 days before the war started. So we can see that 50% of the codes were included in the active defensive side. Still, 33% he uses a constructive negotiative codes as well at the beginning, 15 days before the conflict. So within the active defensive side, he uses security the most by 66%, and then the threat. So he tries to create the threat initially in his discourse. Coming to the constructive side, which is the second one during that time, negotiation and settlement is still on his agenda by 50% for each. Then when we come to the second speech, we see that the situation changed and Putin started to use offensive codes in his speech very, very dominantly. We can see that 46% offensive codes. Then, as you can see, constructive codes just has gone to the last space, from the second to the last space, and it decreased to 7.4%. Now, in the second speech, it gives the signals that the war will just about to start, because Putin started to use offensive words, offensive codes in his speech mostly. So we can see that 31% military, 30% strength, 12% weapon, 10% war, 6% invasion, and others. So some signals about the invasion of some territory of the Ukraine has started to be observed in Putin's speech in this perspective. Then concerning the passive and active defense, we can see, because the constructive one just was the least used code in this one, you can see justice and security. It recalls us the mentions from Plato and Thomas Hobbes. Plato says the main task, main aim of the state is to provide justice, and Thomas has says to provide security. So Putin started to use some codes from the history as well. Then when we come to the last speech of Putin, just on the day of the war started, again, offensive, 51%. Then we can see that the level of the codes used by passive defense and aggressive defense decreased, and constructive, only 3% now. We can see it is all the signals of the war just on the day of the war, and 51%, very dominantly, you can see. And he used strength, military, war, weapon, invasion, and those kind of codes, and almost mentioned all the offensive codes this time. For passive defensive and aggressive defensive, almost similar. Justice and security were the prior ones. When we come to analysis of the Zelensky speech, starting from the first speech, President Zelensky used offensive codes, maybe just to provide a deterrence against the Russian president, to prevent a possible Russian attack to the Ukrainian territory. Zelensky started to use offensive messages, maybe just to give a preemptive message to provide deterrence in this perspective, but it did not stop the Russian party to see. So 44% offensive, 33% active defensive. As you can see, constructives were the last ones. So within the offensive, military and war was the most used codes. Within active and passive defense, you can see strong and defense. So we can understand that Zelensky is decisive to defend the country, and also he wants to stress that they have enough strength to defend the country in his codes. So on the 19th of February, in second speech, again, offensive is the first place, but you can see the percentage of the codes are decreasing to 35%. And now the constructive codes are last, but again increasing. So now it's 15%, because in the first speech it was 6.7% and offensive was 44%. In the second speech, offensive decreased to 35%, constructive increased to 15%, as you can see. Within the offensive, now war is very close. So war, military, weapon, you can see the signals of the coming war. And by looking at the other ones, within the aggressive, security, passive defense, justice. So it is just replacing the places comparing to Putin. So just on the day of the war, which started the last one, again, offensive is the first one, but now increased because the war is started, 58% offensive codes. So passive defense and aggressive defense replaced each other. Constructive again decreased to 3.9%, as you can see. So in the offense, now we can see the military. Now we can also see the codes of enemy, strength, and war, etc. So the war already started. So you can see other ones from these graphs also. Just comparing the Putin and Zelensky codes, Putin has started by using aggressive defense and then increased the codes to offense. But Zelensky, from the first speech to the end, always used offensive at the first place to create deterrence in our evaluation. But it didn't stop the war. So by analyzing the speech of the presidents, it gives the signals of an upcoming war during that time. So we can understand from the speech by having content analysis on them, the situation shows us. And that concludes my presentation, depending on other comments or contributions or questions which will come afterwards. Thank you, Dr. Aslan. I think your voice is closed, switched off.
Yeah, thank you so much, Professor. A perfect reading of narratives, actually, and it gives indicator to either conflicts, wars, and sometimes some sort of preparedness. In this sense, it's really a significant input to delineate exactly what the leaders within the terms of neoclassical realism is, what the narratives of the leaders are, because they are sometimes suffering words, sometimes engaging to each other. And in the meantime, you know, we are in an age that leaders are directly communicating rather than through the embassies, even through WhatsApp or some other channels. That's a fact. So the words are important and the words matter, I believe. On the other hand, I would like to visit one conception, and for me, there's a change inside it. It's geopolitics. The Ukraine war clearly proved that there's a change in perceiving geopolitics. Well, during the Cold War, it was the polarization that forefronted geopolitics regarding the position of the countries and establishment of the alliances. They preferred to control exactly the choke points that could provide a further control upon the other. On the other hand, today, now we have deborderization along with reborderization, and former conceptions on geopolitics is revisited. And in this picture, I believe, the Black Sea region and East Europe has become the priority for many countries, the United States, and also the regional actors. And in this sense, I believe we have to scrutinize the Black Sea, and I would like to invite Ambassador Georgi Magheru for his remarks on the wider Black Sea region with a cross-sectional approach between the challenges of globalization and the realities of unfolding history. I would like to remind that Ambassador Magheru is a career diplomat. He joined the Romanian Ministry of Foreign Affairs in 1990, and up until his retirement, he was there. He held a wide range of managerial positions as Director General for Global, Regional, and Bilateral Affairs. As ambassador, he was permanent representative of Romania to the Council of Europe. He chaired the Ministers' Deputies Committee of Strasbourg-based Human Rights Organization during Romania's tenure in 2005, and he was the political director and advisor to the minister. And now he's participating in this event on behalf of the New Strategy Center as a member of its scientific council. Sir, I would like to thank you because it was a late notice and you accepted our invitation to deliver a speech in this panel. So the floor is yours and our ears just are directed to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Aslan. Well, when my foundation, the New Strategy Centers, gets a call from SETA, usually, however late, the answer is positive. As you know, we are good partners in our academic activities and political events associating scholars and diplomats and politicians. I'm honored to be along your side at this juncture. I can recall that earlier this year, in March, there was another event to which SETA was participating with the Department of Communication of the Turkish Presidency. an event aiming at an inventory of the impact of the war of aggression on Ukraine from the various regional perspectives adjoining Türkiye and its neighbors, including Romania. So I believe such a gathering as this one is an excellent opportunity to combine the regional and global dynamics. And it also indicates that Türkiye is also a repository for accumulated knowledge with a further view to the sedimentation of the ideas related to what we are going through now. Like Turkey, Romania is a Black Sea riparian country sharing a centuries-long history and common security concerns. Participants in this conference, from the Bosphorus to the mouths of the Danube and the Carpathians, from the Balkans to the Caucasus and beyond, represent countries having witnessed the travails and turmoils of devastating regional and world wars, but also the accomplishment of national aspirations and state building, the emergence from the embers of world wars of consistent attempts to establish a rules-based order and endeavors to join superior forms of integration. After the systemic challenges of the Cold War, we are faced today with the outcome of a globalization process whose final shape is yet to be designed. The present-day crisis of the international system, symbolized in its extreme form by the aggression of the Russian Federation against Ukraine, was heralded by warning signals, signs from various areas, be they related to the global challenges ranging from climate to demography, or food resources, energy, financial and economic crisis, or unresolved regional conflicts. In 2020, at the Munich Security Conference, Ambassador Wolfgang Ischinger launched the concept of restlessness, followed in 2021, at the peak of the pandemic, which was mentioned before, by Beyond Restlessness. In his later works, Francis Fukuyama turned back the clock from his end of history to deal with political order and decay, quoting from his other works, and identity issues. It is the paradox of mankind that the Fourth Industrial Revolution, extending the border of knowledge and technology beyond the imagination, is accompanied by the underground movements of the political and military domain, where huge forces are pushing in search of a new configuration. We are witnessing today the multiple nefarious consequences of a large-scale war waged by a European state, aspiring to preserve and reassert its great power status according to the traditional fault lines of spheres of influence and the rule of might, against a sovereign European state embodying that other objective process advancing through the European history, namely the emergence of nations and states bound by a shared community of principles and values. It is the case of Ukraine, who acceded to independence in 1991 as a consequence of the implosion of the Soviet Union. The corollary to this process was the disintegration in the last decade of the 20th century of the former Yugoslavia, in the first major European conflict since the end of World War II. Now we are living the second one on a much larger scale, not only in terms of violence and destruction, but also from the point of view of its impact on the world order and the shaping of the system of international relations. For sure, we can revisit the headlines on the day-to-day impact of the unlawful aggression of Russia against Ukraine, from putting at risk the fragile global trade recovery, the consequences for Europe's order, and the persistent attempt to impose a new world order, justifying under the slogan of multipolarity the demonetization of the basic tenets of international law in order to implement a new order of relativity, leading to the Hobbesian vision of the Leviathan, which I am also resorting to, as was quoted earlier. Now, what can a NATO and EU country like Romania do in the current international environment, bearing in mind our history and geographical position close to the epicenter of today's armed conflict? We are at the stone's throw from the Ukrainian port of Odessa and the already famous Serpent Island lying in the immediate proximity of our border. The Serpent Island, it's a huge geostrategic significance in stark contrast to its size of less than 1 square kilometers. The Ukrainian army has written history on this subject. Now, we are EU and NATO members sharing the longest border with Ukraine, and we have been playing since the very beginning an important role in terms of humanitarian assistance, food security, and accountability in accordance with the principles of international law. I will start with the basics, because in order to reach the general outcome of international order, we have to start with our day-to-day business. Yesterday, Mr. Nicolae Ciucă, the Prime Minister of Romania, met in northern Romania the Prime Minister of Ukraine, Mr. Denis Smihal, where they opened together a new border crossing between Romania and Ukraine. The Romanian Prime Minister stated that it is now that Ukraine needs the support and solidarity of the European states and the members of the international community sharing the same values of liberty, dignity, and the right of every state to decide its own future. Premier Ciucă said this border crossing is not only an additional link between two neighboring countries, but also a step in Ukraine's relation with the EU, whose candidacy we have supported, Ukraine. The significance of this act is related to the vital relevance of mobility of persons and goods as a consequence of the illegal, premeditated, and unprovoked aggression against Ukraine, with a disastrous impact on its citizens and the government of Ukraine. It is perhaps adequate to mention here, in the framework of the Istanbul Conference, that Romania has not only assisted 2.6 million Ukrainian citizens crossing the borders or given shelter and access to a civilized life to those who have chosen to stay in our country. Currently, through the railway, road, and port facilities of Romania and Constanța and Galați, more than 6.5 million tons of Ukrainian cereals have been exported. This is part of a multidimensional and multi-institutional effort, and Turkey knows probably better than many others what it is at stake with the cereals. Now, I would like to make some very concrete points, hoping not to take too much time. It refers to Black Sea security, relevance, and opportunities. Some highlights. The NATO strategic concept confirms the strategic importance of the Black Sea for the alliance. The Russian aggression reveals the need to strengthen economic sovereignty of the countries from the Baltic to the Black Sea and Caspian in order to increase security. Strategic security of the Black Sea is strongly linked to energy security, interconnectivity, cybersecurity, and joint reconstruction efforts of Ukraine. The blockade of the Ukrainian ports' impact on high risk for world food security was enhanced by the recent war. The Black Sea is a critical knot in the global supply chain network. We have to mention here the global gateway European strategy, plus the increased relevance given to the middle corridor, the Trans-Caspian, as an alternative to the northern corridor. It's essential for Central Asian, the Caucasus, and Eastern Europe interests. Now, the port of Constanța proved its strategic relevance as a gateway for goods from East Asia, Middle East, to Central Eastern Europe. Regional cooperation strengthens regional security and sovereignty and decreases dependence on Russia. Energy. The Russian aggression profound impact on energy security and European policy as a strength a strong dependency was weaponized. We need to diversify energy supplies and accelerate green energy transition. We rely on a diversified and balanced energy mix. Actually, the Russian aggression has stressed the test for the EU energy market. So we have to reform the energy market design. We have to mitigate the supply crisis by increased LNG world suppliers, increased internal production. Dependence of Europe from Russian gas has decreased from 45 to 9%. I think this is of geopolitical significance, to use this word. A new global energy economy is advancing strongly. Now, let us think on the security impact of the offshore resources, both of Ukraine and Romania, from the point of view of the supply to Europe. And this is, and Turkey is also equally concerned in this. How are we going to provide for the security of our resources in the present context? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. You know, if you say the Black Sea does have a different characteristic, a different feature, it's both a crack of differing civilizations, and in the meantime, it's a touch of the continents. I mean, not only Turkey, but the Black Sea is really in between the civilizations, continents. So I think the Straits of Turkey and also the Black Sea should be taken together as a unique geographical feature. And it does have really effect on the politics, either at global level or at regional level. Well, Mr. Astrit does have a technical difficulty, so he could not connect. So I would like to start a discussion session right after these presentations, because we know that the impacts of Ukraine war integrated with climate change, environmental degradation, the conflicts of other sorts on the globe. I mean, it's not only the conflicts on the ground. I mean, if you check, there's a great digital conflict right now ongoing. Our bank accounts are not in safe. On the other hand, we know that there's a continuous risk for the sustainability of our lives. And it's something that states are short of responding them collectively. So in this sense, we have to start thinking about it. So I would like to invite audience, either directing questions or contributing their ideas, so we can start a discussion, if you allow me. I'm waiting any input from the other participants, if they are available or if they want. They can raise hand or directly start talking. Okay. No input. Then I would like to say thank you first to the contributors and the keynote speakers. Being aware of the time limitation, we will have another panel at 1500 hours. So that means we will give a break, and then you can just click the same link. It will be continuously open. You can test if you want, and we can continue. If there is no contribution or no question after all. Okay. Thank you so much for participation, Mr. Ambassador, Professor Keser, Mr. Ambassador. So we will see you maybe in the coming term, in the next panel. So I'm closing this session. Thank you so much.
Thanks from our side as well.
Bye-bye.
Thank you as well. All the best.
Bye-bye. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Emma, I think you are in the room, Emma.